Over the last decade, many Zimbabweans have been forced to flee their country due to economic decline and political turmoil. But political opposition is rising against the 93-year-old president, and no one is certain about the country's political future. I sat down with Ambassador Arikana Chihombori-Quao, the African Union ambassador to the U.S. and a native of Zimbabwe, to get her perspective.
Zimbabweans are very resilient people. Now, who would have thought we would still be standing with everything that we have gone through? Zimbabweans will make it.
As Zimbabweans consider their voting choices for president in July 2018, Ambassador Chihombori has a message for her fellow citizens.
My message to the Zimbabweans, particularly the ones in the diaspora, being that we're here in the diaspora, I encourage Zimbabweans to participate in the electoral process. We have elections coming up, we need parliamentarians, we need new parties coming in. So I encourage the citizens of Zimbabwe to get involved, particularly the diaspora. Don't just sit back here and complain and fire charges at governments. It's not just Zimbabwe, and I'm saying this is true of all African countries. Don't just sit in the diaspora and complain about what's happening at home.
Over the years, Western countries have cut or reduced aid to Zimbabwe, citing human rights abuses and lack of political transparency.
So you have sanctions, we have sanctions. In this America, the imperialist at the top of it all.
We as Africans, we got to move away from this aid mode that we seem to have been perpetually in. We need to get ourselves in a position where we can be self-sufficient. So our relationship at this point tends to be dictated by, in some cases, need for aid. We got to get away from that.
I would like to know from you about the leadership of President Robert Mugabe. Some people in a nutshell will say he has really failed Zimbabwe. Is that a correct assessment?
I can't answer the question as to whether or not he has failed or been good for Zimbabwe. What I can tell you is what's happening in Zimbabwe, rising of oppositions, is nothing new. It's happening even here in this country. That is just the nature of the political process. I don't think we should single out Zimbabwe and say what's happening in Zimbabwe is unique. It's happening all over the world. We have elections. Let's see what happens.
The country's economy continues on a downward spiral, and the cash crunch is forcing banks to reduce daily withdrawal limits. In recent years, Mugabe has been seeking sporadic treatment in Singapore, raising questions among Zimbabweans on how long he can hang on to power. Esther Githui-Ewart, VOA News, Washington.